Thank you for joining us. The following program is presented by Rico Cortes.
Shabbat Shalom and welcome to Wisdom and Torah Ministries, Shabbat Torah portions. This week is very unique than all the other weeks. This week we don't have a regular, it's not going to be Kedoshim, it's not going to be the Torah portion Kedoshim, due to the fact that this week has been Pesach. And we had the first, and now we are, we celebrated Pesach this week, and now we are on the Shabbat in the same week of Pesach. I think on Monday we're going to have the last day of unleavened bread. So on this week, what we do, we have a separate reading altogether, and it's Exodus 12, verse 21 to 51. Now we did cover a lot of this in the future, in the past, when we covered the story of the Exodus. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the story. I'm going to read the story in Exodus, and then I'm going to read from Joshua and from all the portions that are there, and I'm going to connect it. It's going to be a short teaching. I'm going to connect it with First Corinthians 10, the whole chapter. We're going to read it, trying to understand basically what it's saying. I pray that you had a great Pesach, and now on this Shabbat, we continue our celebration of Pesach. It must have been an amazing experience for you this year, understanding, after you heard my teaching on the threshold covenant, really what you're getting into, which is a covenant, ancient covenant of a marriage covenant, covenantal meal, very significant. Now think about this. The Creator of heaven and earth desires to come in covenant with you and fellowship with you. That in itself is overwhelming in itself, and it's something that I think we all should be mindful of. Now let me read here the story of our redemption, and this is the portion that we read today for instead of the parasha. This is what we read today, okay? So now, then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, pick out and take lambs for yourselves according to your families, and killed the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood, and is the basin, and strike it in the lintel and doorpost with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out the door until the morning. Now we know what that means, because if you've been watching the threshold covenant, this is very significant. I highly encourage you to go back and look at that on the blog. For the Lord will pass to strike the Egyptians when he sees the blood on the lintels and the two doorposts. The Lord will pass over the door, in other words, not over the houses, over the threshold, we're a little different, and not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to strike you. And you shall observe this thing as an ordinance for you and for your sons forever. It will come to pass that when you come to the land which the Lord your God gives you, just as a promise, then you shall keep this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? That you will say, it is the Passover sacrifice of the Lord, who passed over the houses of Israel, of the children of Israel, passed over the houses of the children of Israel, when he struck the Egyptians and delivered out of the household, so the people bowed their heads and worshiped. Then the children of Israel went away and did so, just as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they do. It says, and it came to pass at midnight. Now this is really important, because Yeshua is having the covenantal meal. More of an informal teaching this weekend, because we're trying to understand certain principles and connect it to the Brit Hadashah. And this is important because instead of us fighting and arguing about when you keep the Passover, when don't you keep it, well, we should focusing on the big picture of what the Yeshua really tried to do for us. So, as we continue to work on this, and we think about this, when it came at midnight, watch this, and it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of all the captives, who was in the dungeon, to all the firstborns of the livestock. Okay, so Pharaoh rose in the morning, he and all the servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Now this is really important, because one of the steps of ancient covenant is the exchange of the firstborn. And we know that Yeshua becomes the firstborn of all creation. If we all believe Yeshua is pre-existent, that he lives from the beginning, that he's not just a man, he is more than a man. He is pre-existent, and he sits at the right hand of the Father. So then what you have is that Yeshua becomes the firstborn of all creation, and he is exchanged on behalf of Israel. He is exchanged on behalf of the redemption of Israel back to him. Now, so what I find really peculiar is that Yeshua has a covenantal meal, and around midnight Yeshua gets arrested. You know, right around the same time, when the angel of the Lord came looking for the firstborn. So Yeshua now gets arrested around the same time also. Okay? And we can go on that a few more times, but I want to move on to the next topics that I have. Verse 31. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, rise up and go out from among the people, both you and your children of Israel, and go and serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flock, that's Pharaoh calling Aaron and Moses to take the children of Israel out. Also take your flock and your herds and all what you have said, be gone and bless me also. The Egyptians urged the people that they might send them away of the land in haste, for they said, what shall be dead? Shall we all be dead? So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes and the shoulders. I learned something really interesting this week that I never really thought about before, and I've been studying with some people from Israel, and I've been asking people that have been doing this for a long time. And I've asked the question because I've been looking for kosher wine, because I celebrate the Pesach with kosher wine. But when I began to study more and more and more, what we came to find out was that in fact the leaven is from grain, not from the vine. You follow? So in fact, when they said you're supposed to have kosher wine, what we find out is the leaven basically should come from the yeast, should come from the grain. Now it is possible that you can have wine that there's no yeast in that. Okay, so if they add regular yeast, then yes. Now beer, for example, I'm not endorsing the practice, but beer comes from barley, and you have to, they have to be, have to have the yeast on that. So there are very things that I'm learning that I think is very peculiar. Verse 35, now the children of Israel had done according to the words of Moses. They have asked from the Egyptians article of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord has given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and they granted them all that they requested, and they plundered the Egyptians. Now what do you find that's the fulfillment of that? That is the fulfillment of the prophecies in Genesis 15. In Genesis 15, you have that it says, but in the fourth generation they shall return here from the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Let me move on here. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay, verse 14 of chapter 15 of Genesis says, and also the nation whom you serve I will judge afterward. They shall come out with great possessions. So here you have the fulfillment of what was promised by Yahweh to Abraham back there in Genesis 15. So this is one of the proofs that Yahweh does exist. Exodus 12 verse 37 says, then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, besides men. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, and a great deal of livestock. Now we know that the mixed multitude in this particular place are not the Gentiles. They are basically a particular race of people that are called the Arab Rav. The Arab Rav. It's a mixture of people. It could have been Arabians, it could have been Midianites, it could have been Amalekites. All those people, we don't know, but there's a mixture of them, okay? A mixed multitude. The word mixed multitude, that's one of the only places in the Torah that you find the word Arab Rav like that together in reference to a people. And it says, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait. No, they had prepared provision for themselves. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt were 430 years. Now, what I find really, really cool, a brother called me the other day, and Brother Gilbert from Texas, he was making some very interesting connections that I find fascinating. He said that, and I agree with him, that the children of Israel, basically, there are a lot of connections, at the same time that they crossed the Jordan, the river, the Red Sea, they crossed the Jordan into the land. There are a lot of parallels that you can connect with all these dates. By the way, you know that the encounter of Yahweh with Abraham in Genesis 18 was on a Pesach. It was not called Pesach, but if you read the story carefully and some key words in the Hebrew, you see that there was matzah there, and there was basically Pesach, okay? So the covenant, the promise with Isaac happened to be with Pesach. And that fulfillment of that covenant was fulfilled when they came out of Egypt. On the same day that the covenant was made, that's the same day when they came out of Egypt. Okay? Now, verse 40. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was, I already read you that. Verse 41. And it came to pass, at the end of 430 years, on the very same day that it came to pass, that all the armies of the Lord went out in the land of Egypt. It is night of solemn observance of Yah Adonai to bring them out of the land of Egypt. This is the night that Adonai, that Yahweh, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout their generations. If you're not Israel, this is not for you, because this is to all the children of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No outsider shall eat it. But every man's servant who bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then you may eat it. And a sojourner on a higher hand shall not eat it. In one house shall be eaten. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break out the bones. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger, this is very important. I'm going to talk to you about this right now. And I'm going to get stuck here for a little bit. What I'm going to do, I'm going to connect this with 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Okay, because what I've come to find out is that biblical conversion not only happens when you accept the Messiah, that's redemption. But conversion really happens when you take Passover. Listen to this. It says, and when a stranger, by the way, that's not a goyim, that's not a Gentile, they're not in covenant, they're not supposed to be at the table with you. A stranger, a gorim, ger sadik, a proselyte, soldier with you and wants to keep the Passover of Yahweh, let all his males be circumcised, and let him come near and keep it, and he shall be a native to the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat it. One Torah shall be for the native born and for the stranger who sojourns among you. Thus all the children of Israel did, as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, and they did. Now, why is this verse so significant? Because in Numbers chapter 15 and verse 16 says, one Torah and one ordinance for the native born and for the stranger. Now, this is the equivalent of conversion in the Bible. Not rabbinical conversion, that you have to go through a process of 2 years and you have to go through all the rabbinical requirements in order for you to be accepted in the community. But biblically, the moment you take Pesach and you eat of the Passover, and this is why it's important that you do not mix it with Easter. The moment you sit at that table, basically you're saying, I'm coming in covenant with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this is why the circumcision is important, because it's letting you know this is for covenant people. And the circumcision is a sign of the covenant. Now we know we have circumcision of the flesh, of the heart. We know that. Circumcision of the heart, we know that. But it's talking about in the context of if there's a Gentile who wants to come in and be partaker of Israel, you have to do what Israel does, because you are in fact coming into a covenant. Now, so what is it? What is all about this? Yeshua, when he said in Luke 22, let's go to Luke 22. When we go to Luke chapter 22, okay, in verse 15 and 16, Yeshua says some very significant words. Verse 14 says, and when the hour had come, he sat down, and the 12 were with him, the 12 tribes. And he said to them, with fervent desire, have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say to you, I will no longer eat of it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of Elohim. Then he took the cup and gave thanks, and and says, divide it among yourselves. For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until I'm in my Father's kingdom. My Father's kingdom, the kingdom of God comes. Now, what does it mean by that? Now, I'm not going to argue whether or not you believe he took Passover or not. It's irrelevant right now. He's doing a covenantal meal. It's important that he is taking a covenantal meal, which that's what Passover is all about. But really, why did Yeshua say, I will not drink of this anymore until I am my Father's in the kingdom of God? It's because he is allowing you to have an invitation. The invitation to come in the kingdom lasts all the way from the time he took the fruit of the vine and he blessed it, and he said, I will not drink on this. From the moment he took the covenantal meal, all the way to the time when he comes back and we're in the weddings of the Lamb, and then he will drink of that wine. Okay, he will drink of the fruit of the vine. So this is really important, because now we are redeemed, and he's extending the invitation to everybody to come in. Now, I just had something in my mind that it was needed to make It was needed. That was what I was supposed to make sense of all of this. So by Yeshua dying and making covenant with us, and by not drinking of the wine, he is in fact, what he's doing, opening the invitation, keeping the invitation open so anybody will come. This is why the rabbis, I just remembered, and this is why the rabbis believed. If you listen to the Chabad, if you listen to Rambam and Rashi and all of them, they all believe one consensus that the basically Exodus was an example, was a demonstration of the final redemption. That finally, the final redemption, that the redemption really is going to end, because you have from Passover to the Mount Sinai, right? You got Passover and then you go to Mount Sinai. Well, they believe that the real process of redemption is not going to end. It's not going to end until Messiah comes, Mashiach comes in the Messianic age. So this is interesting because Yeshua takes of the cup and he says, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until I find the kingdom of God. Okay, comes to you. So basically he's saying, in many other words, he is saying, I'm going to allow the kingdom to be open. The kingdom will be open. The invitation is going to be with you until I return. It's an open invitation, and Yeshua being the threshold covenant and being the guaranteed of that covenant to come in, he allows you to be able to join in as part of the holy people of Elohim. All you need to do is to be in covenant. So no, it is not accepted for you to have Passover and then celebrate Israel and then celebrate Easter. No, and it's not acceptable either to invite people who are family members who could care less about Passover, eating at the table of covenant, and then they're going to go and commit sins and abominations, and they're going to transgress the Torah, because that brings curses upon themselves. Okay. Now let me retrace my steps here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Seder. You know, when you do the Haggadah, the telling of the story. And then in the regular Art Scroll Siddur, this is the Haggadah, the Pesach Matzor, okay? And this is the Ashkenaz. I should have the Sephardi or the Sephardi. Okay, so when you do the story, the telling of the exile, of the redemption from Egypt, there comes a point that I think is important. Okay, when it's called the Magid. Now the broken matzah is lifted up to all to see, as the head of the household begins with the following brief explanation of the processing. So what they do, they take the matzah, okay, the broken matzah, they take the middle of the three, they break it, and they lift it up, and then the person starts reading, and they says, and that's when the children start asking the 4 questions, right? And then after they ask the 4 questions, then what you do, you start putting the Seder plate is returned, you put the Seder plate back, and then the matzah is kept uncovered as the Haggadah is recited, and then you go on and you start reading from Exodus. You start reading from Exodus story, Exodus 12:26. Actually, you do a whole reading, all kinds of verses. You do Deuteronomy chapter 16:3, 6:20, Exodus 12:26, Exodus 13:8, Exodus 13:14, Exodus 13:8. And then you start reading Joshua 24:2 and 4, Genesis 15:13, 14. I mean, you read all kinds of verses, but it comes a point when the matzahs are covered and the cups are lifted as the following paragraphs is proclaimed. So after you break the matzah, and I'm sure everybody missed it because we're not studying from a traditional siddur, and I think that, let me tell you something, if you ever have an opportunity to read the Mishnah, the Mishnayot of Pesach, Mishnayot Pesach, you'll learn a lot about what used to happen in the tabernacle, in the temple, during the time of Passover, and all the rituals they had to do. Okay? So what you do, you go to Tractate Pesachim for Pesach, and you read the whole Mishnayot, and you read what was happening. Okay? Let me give you an example. We know Yeshua died in the middle of the week. You might say, well, Rico, how can you make sure? Because the Mishnah tells you that when the Passover will fall on a Friday, regular weekday, for a regular Friday, leading to Sabbath, if the Passover will fall on a Friday evening, or, like on Pesach, will fall on a regular weekly Sabbath. So the Mishnah tells you that they will kill the Passover lamb between 1:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon to make sure they have time to get ready for Shabbat. Not only is Pesach, but it's also special Shabbat. It's also regular weekly Sabbath. But we know that Yeshua died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, during the time of the second Hagigah. So therefore now what happens is that we know that Yeshua couldn't have possibly died on a Friday, like the church says. Okay, he died on a Wednesday afternoon, and then you have 3 days and 3 nights from the moment he got buried, and then he was resurrected at the time he was buried. 72 hours to the minute, to the second, and everything was right there. So he resurrected at the end of the Sabbath, leading on to the first day of the week, but not on the first day of the week like the church believes. Okay? Anyway, as I was saying with the story here on the Pesach, you get to this point where it says, Vehi she'amdat le'avotenu velanu. It says, Shelo echad kebilva. It says, Amad alenu lekalotenu. Okay, it says, Ela Shevechol dor vador. Says umdim alenu lekalotenu. It says, and it continues. It says vehakadosh bauchu matzilenu miyadam. Okay, what does that mean in Hebrew? From the Hebrew, it says, it is this day that he has stood by our fathers and us. For not only has one risen against us to annihilate us, but in every generation they rise against us to annihilate us. But blessed be the Holy One, who rescues us from their hand. And this is a very important little prayer that we do when we cover the matzah, when we break the matzah. Remember, the breaking of the matzah represents Mashiach. Okay, and then what you do is you basically raise up the cup and you start reading that and you sing it. Yossi Asulai was a singer in Israel. He sings that beautifully. And I think this should be part of our Passover experience, because at one point when the matzah, who represents Messiah, is broken, right, and is lifted up, and then they lift up the wine, then we want to recall that even though the enemy wants to annihilate us, there's always, blessed be he, okay, who rescues us from their hand. Okay, so blessed be who? The one whose matzah was broken. Alright? So now, as I was saying earlier in Exodus chapter 12, verse 47 and 48 and 49, just now we understand that Pesach, in fact, is in my opinion, is the biblical requirement of conversion. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Okay, you see, when you accept Yeshua with your mouth, you are redeemed. Okay, but redemption is freely given. It doesn't require to keep any commandment to obtain that redemption. You accept by faith, and you are in the kingdom. But then when you partake of Passover, then what happens is that now you are declaring with your actions that you want to be part of that people of Israel. One custom, one law, one people, one Torah, Israel. You follow? So then you start living as a Torah observant person. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I pray this makes sense to you. This is a short teaching, you know. I've been really quite busy trying to do all the stuff I need to do, and I'm getting a little break from the Torah and doing something basically from the cuff, just from the top of my head, trying to give you some more insight about the stuff that we're trying to do. And this is the reason I want to read you this chapter, because Paul is beautifully trying to teach them. If you go to chapter 8, he's talking about, now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge, and knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. Now he's talking about idolatry. He's trying to teach the people about the problems of idolatry in the congregation, right? So now what we need to remember is that he is talking to them. Actually, you know what? Let's read the whole chapter 8 and chapter 9, and go on into chapter 10, and we'll finish with this. Okay? It says, now concerning things offered to idol, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. That goes very much well in hand with what the rabbis say, that the more we know, the less we know, which is true. But if anyone loves Elohim, this one is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idol, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other Elohim but one. We know that. But even if they are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, and there are many gods and many lords, right? Parentheses. Yet for us there is only one Elohim, the Father, okay, of whom all are things, and we for him, and one Master, Yeshua the Messiah, through whom all things and through whom we live. Why? How come we live through him? Because he becomes the threshold covenant for us, the guarantee of our redemption. Now it says, however, there is not in everyone that knowledge. There is not in everyone that knowledge. For some, with consciousness of the idol, and until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So now he's dealing with the differences between people that are weak, that they let become to influence. In reality, there's no other God except one. You know? And he's talking about foods offered to idol that you're going to eat. Okay? It says, beware lest someone has liberty of yours become a stumbling block. Beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. But if anyone sees you, and who have knowledge eating of an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, of whom Messiah died? Now what he's doing, he's comparing somebody who has maturity in the Lord who doesn't. Some people can handle things more than others, okay? But when you thus sin against the brethren, and wonder weak conscience, you sin against Mashiach. Therefore, if food makes your brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. You see, he's not saying you can't eat meat. He's not saying you can eat pork. He's talking about eating meat, okay? Because some people like Paul Neeson, my friend, he's a vegan. You know, he don't eat meat, right? So does that mean that he's not holier than me because I eat meat and he doesn't, or vice versa? No, that's his spiritual immaturity where he's at, and he's able to do that. Well, Baruch Hashem Yahweh, that's what he wants to do. So we don't judge each other. He helps us understand more things to grow. Let's read verse chapter 9. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Am I not seeing Messiah Yeshua Master? Are you not my work? Are you not my work in the Master, in the Lord? For I am not an apostle to others, yet doubtless I am to you. For you are the zeal of my apostleship to Adonai. My defense to those who examine me is this: Do we have no right to eat and drink? Do we have no right to take along a believing wife, and do also the other apostles and the brothers of the Master and Kepha? Or it is only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? Now the issue here is that he's talking about work, so supplying for his needs. Okay? Whoever goes to war at his own expense, who plants a vineyard and does not eat its fruits, and who tends the flock and does not drink of the milk of the flock? Do I say these things as a mere man, or does not the law say to the same also? For it is written, the law, the Torah of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. It is oxen God is concerned about? Or does he say it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt. This is written, that he who plows shall plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope shall be partaker of his hope. If we have sown spiritual things for you, if we, and myself included, have sown spiritual things for you, it is a great thing. If we reap your material things, if others are partakers of this over you, are we not even more? Nevertheless, we have not used this right, but endure all things lest we hinder the gospel of Messiah. Do you not know that those who minister the holy things eat of the things of the temple, and those who serve at the altar partake of the offerings of the altar? He's trying to let you know, those who work for the kingdom, they need to support themselves and support their families, and they eat of the kingdom. Okay? It says, verse 15, but I have used none of these things, nor I have written these things, that it should be done so to me. For it will be better for me to die, then anyone should make boasting void. For I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast. For necessity is laid upon me. Yes, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, I have been entrusted with a stewardship. And he says, what is my stewardship then? That when I preach the gospel, I may present the gospel of Messiah without charge, right? That I may not abuse authority of the gospel. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself servant to all, that I may win them more. Now, this is a really good example, and this is so you'll know where I'm coming from. This is why I don't have a fee anywhere I go teach. They ask me how much I charge, and I don't have a fee, based on these principles, because I always believed that if I do my job with enthusiasm, with the zeal that Yahweh has given me, then He will provide for you, and then He'll move your heart, and then you'll provide for our needs. Okay, so I don't have to set a fee in order for me to go speak anywhere, because it's like buying you to go speak whatever they want. Remember, when they pay money, anyway. So let me move on from that. I'm talking about Pesach, and I'm talking about something else now. I'm just trying to read chapter 8 and 9 in context of chapter 10, okay? Not to here beg you about money or anything like that. So understand, we got to read the chapters like that. Verse 20, unto the Jews I became a Jew, that I may win the Jew. When we win Jews, to those who are under the law, as under the law, that I may win who are under the law. And to those who are without law, as without law, not being without law toward God. Now listen to what it says. To those who are without law, as without law, and then parentheses says, but not being without law towards God. Okay, well, I find very interesting. But on the law towards Messiah, that I may win some without law. To the weak I became weak, as weak, and as I might win the weak. I have also become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may partake of it with you. Okay? Do you not know that those who run in the race all run, but one receives the prize? Okay, if everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things, now they do it to obtain perishable crowns, but we as an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I disciple my body to bring it to subjection, lest I have preached thereof to others, I myself become myself disqualified. Now chapter 10. Chapter 10 says, moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all of our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea, all ate of the same spiritual food, all drank of the same spiritual drink, for they drank of the spiritual rock, and that followed them, and the rock was Mashiach. But with most of them Elohim was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became as examples as our examples, to the intent that we shall not lust after evil things as they lust also. And do not become idolaters, as were some of them, as it was written, the people sat down, ate and drank, and rose to play. Now this is interesting, because now he's making a connection with the time of Mount Sinai and Shavuot, we're worshiping the golden calf. Okay. Nor let us tempt Messiah, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed by serpents. Nor murmur, as some of them also murmur and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, on whom the ends of the ages have come. Now therefore let him who think he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to men. But Elohim is faithful, and will not allow you to be tempted beyond that which you are able. But with the temptation you will make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. Just like Joseph. Okay, he was tempted by Potiphar's wife. He ran away. He didn't stay there and entertain the idea. Now, verse 14. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. Remember that in the first century, Mithraism was very rampant. This is current. This is the hotbed of Mithraistic practice. Also among all the gods, they used to worship Diana and some of the other type of gods. Remember, it says, I speak to wise men, judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, it is not, and it says the word communion there, and I don't like that word communion. It should not be there. That word communion comes from Mithraism, from the Catholic Church. The cup of blessing which we bless, it is not communion of the blood of Christ. The bread which we break, it is not communion of the body of Christ. The word communion should not be there. It says sharing. Okay? For we being many are one bread and one body, and we all partake of that one bread. Okay, it's talking about Pesach. And it says, observe Israel after the flesh. Are not those who eat the sacrifices partakers of the altar? What am I saying then? That the idol is anything? Or what is offered to idol is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to Elohim. And I don't want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink of the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and of the table of demons. Ladies and gentlemen, when somebody takes Pesach, come in covenant, and then they have Easter, it's as eating the table of the Lord and then eating the table of demons. Okay? Do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things do not edify, right? Now let me see what it says here. In verse 23, it actually omits for me. When you go back, it says, all things are lawful. The word for me is not in the Greek, so you can just get rid of it. Okay? But all things are not helpful. So you see, when somebody reads that from the New King James or the King James says, all things are lawful for me, they say, you see, you can eat whatever you want. When in fact, the word for me is omitted in some of the ancient manuscripts. It says, let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake, for the earth. Now, asking no questions. If you don't know it's been sacrificed to idols, then guess what? You're not conscious with that. You don't have to worry about it. Okay? Why? Because he was living, he was right into the current. When I went to Greece, I saw something really interesting, that in some of the ancient archaeological ruins, they had like a little hole in the kitchen. And that's where they used to put their gods. They used to offer it to the gods and then serve it to you. Okay? It's like when you go to some Chinese places, not all of them, but some Chinese places, they have Buddhas and all kinds of places. And I've been told by people that they do that. Indian food, by the way. Some of the Indian food, I just found out that there are Indians that are Hindus and there are Indians that are not. You know that. Okay? Not all Indians are Hindus. Well, how do you know? If you go to an Indian place and they serve you meat, then those are not Hindus. See, the Hindus, basically they are vegetarians. So if you go to an Indian place that is vegetarian, that means that all the food there is sacrificed to their god. Okay? So I just found that out very recently. So when I go eat Indian food, I basically go to the one where they eat meat. Okay? They're not religious Hindus. They're not Indians that are Hindus. They're basically just Indians. Let me continue. Verse 27. If any of those who do not believe invite you to dinner, and you desire to go eat whatever is set before you, asking no questions for conscience sake. Now, many people will take this verse to say that it means whatever they serve you, whether it's pork, whether it's ham, whether it's whatever. Right? That's not what it's saying. Remember that the context of the chapter is meat sacrificed to idols. Okay? Meats that are edible, not unkosher meats. You follow? I'm not talking biblical meat. So if the guy serves you pork, the commandment is commandment. You're not supposed to eat it. But if they serve you lamb, you pray and you eat it, because you're not going to ask if it was sacrificed to idols or not. Okay? But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it. You see what I mean? For the sake of for the one who told you, and for conscience sake. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. True. Conscience, I say, not to your own, but that to the others. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? For if I partake with things, why I speak evil? For if I partake with things, why am I evil spoken for the food over which I give thanks? Therefore, whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do all for the glory of Elohim. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to give glory to Elohim if you're eating lobster, if you eat pork, if you eat all that stuff, which is unclean. Give no offense either to the Jew or to the Greek, or to the congregation of Elohim. Just as I also pleaded, please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but to profit of many, that they may be saved. So, we have to remember that a lot of these principles that are here is to help us understand these principles. Is that chapter directly combined with Pesach? No, it's talking about meat sacrificed to idols versus we're talking about Passover. But remember, we cannot take the connection that I'm trying to make is we cannot eat of Passover and then go have Easter like some people. It ain't going to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not going to happen. Because the sunrise service on the birth of the resurrection of Yeshua, it did not happen on a Sunday morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeshua did not resurrect on a Sunday morning. Yeshua resurrected towards the end of the Sabbath, and his body was not found. His tomb was empty, and they found it already on the first day of the week. Okay? So these are things that are really important for us to remember and for us to be mindful of as we continue to work in this understanding of the Torah. Let me read Joshua 3. Joshua chapter 3, verse 5. Joshua chapter 3, verse 5 to 7. It says this. It says, and Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, I'm in the wrong chapter. No, I'm in the right chapter. And it says, and the Lord said to the people, this day I will begin to magnify you in the sight of all Israel, that you may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Okay? So let me move on to chapter 5. In verse 2 on, when they cross over the Jordan, they are going to celebrate Pesach. Remember, the first generation came out of Egypt. They came in covenant right here, by the way. Verse 8, it says, you shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, says, when you have come into the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the water. So Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and hear the words of Yahweh Elohim. Okay, so now he's talking to them, and basically he is hearing the words of Yahweh. Okay, and now in chapter 5, verse 2, they're going to have Passover. So the children of Israel come out of Egypt, they go through a body of water. The children of Israel come out of the wilderness, and before they possess the land, they go through a body of water. It's like the birthing process. Remember that. It says, at that time, chapter 5, verse 2. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives for yourselves, and circumcise the sons of Israel again, the second time. The second time. So where was the first time? Remember, this is the second generation. So Joshua made flint knives for himself, and uncircumcised the son of Israel at the heel of the foreskins. Gilbeach ha'agalot. Says, for this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Egypt, who were males, all of men of war, who died in the wilderness on the way, after they have come out of Egypt. For all the people who came out of Egypt had been circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Egypt were not circumcised. Interesting, right? So now what does this mean? Prophetically, what does this mean? Some of you who are not circumcised now, when Mashiach comes, because remember Joshua is a type and shadow of the Messiah. So when Mashiach comes, then you're going to be supernaturally circumcised. Why? In Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 6 all the way to verse 9 says this. Now say to the rebellious house of Israel, thus says Adonai Elohim, O house of Israel, let us have no more all of your abominations. When you brought in foreigners uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh to be in my sanctuary to defile it. My house, even when you offered my food, they fattened the blood, and they broke my covenant because of all their abominations. What was their abominations? They worship all the gods. Again, you keep Passover, and you have what? You have, if you keep Passover, and then you have Easter, you have Sunday, you have Christmas, then you're basically worshiping other gods. Now, it says, and you have not kept charge of the holy things, verse 8, and you shall not keep charge of my holy things, but you have set others to keep my charge and my sanctuary for you. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, no foreigner uncircumcised in heart or uncircumcised in flesh shall enter my sanctuary, including any foreigner who shall be among the children of Israel. Okay, now remember the word foreigner there is the word gel. The word gel is not the word goyim. The word goyim is Gentiles, it's not ger. The word ger means covenant. It means stranger. Okay? And I'm looking for something here because I was trying to find the verse that talks about Passover. Let me find this real quick. Let us keep the feast. Specifically, that's in 1 Corinthians 5:8. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 5. That's really what I wanted to talk to you about. I went to the different chapter, but it tied up together because it has to do with idolatry. And right now we have to, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you this. You better put a line in the sand and decide where you're going to stand. The time has come that we have to stand up for righteousness. Those who are on Yahweh's side, stand up on His word and choose this day, which Elohim you're going to serve. Which one are you going to serve? The Elohim of the God of the nations and the God of paganism that have been adopted by the Christianity, or you're going to stand on the gap and you're going to accept the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So now, when we go into 1 Corinthians 5, let's read. Okay, it says, it is actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and sexual immorality as not even name among the Gentiles, that a man has his father's wife. And you're going to see this part in the Kedoshim, in chapter 20, 19 and 20 of Leviticus. And you are puffed up, and you have not rather mourned, that he who has done this deed might be taken away from among you? For I indeed, as absent in the body, but present in spirit, have already judged, as though I was present concerning him who has done this deed. He's saying, I'm not there, but I'm already judging you as if I was there. In the name of our Master Yeshua the Messiah, when you are gathered together, along with my spirit, with the power of our Master Yeshua the Messiah, deliver such as one to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that his spirit may be saved in the day of our Master. Okay? It says, your glorying, it is not good. There's pride over there. It's pride. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Now this is Passover language. And then he says, therefore let us keep the feast, not with all leaven. Now he's saying, not with the all way of life, because sin is leaven, pride is leaven. Remember, you get puffed up. It's talking about pride. It says, not with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I wrote to you in my epistle not to keep company with the sexually immoral people. Yet I certainly did not mean with the sexually immoral people of this world, but with the covetous and the extortioners and idolaters. Since then you will need to go out of the world. But now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone, name a brother who is a fornicator, covetous, or idolater, or reviler, or drunkard, or extortioner, not even to eat with such a person. For what have to do with judging those who are outside? Why does he say that? How come he can't judge those who are outside? Because they're not covenant people. They're not covenant people. Okay? For those who are outside, God judges. Therefore, put away from yourselves that wicked person. He's giving them advice in regards to somebody who's committing some abomination, sleeping with somebody's father's wife, or the father's wife. So, we see there's a lot of issues that they were dealing with in Corinth. Do me a favor, go into the history books, start finding out about the history of the first century. I have a really good book here. It's actually in my, let me get up this frame here real quick, with all due respect. I want you to see this book. Come back in the frame again. This book right here, okay, it's actually on my resources. It is called, it's called The Sacred Bridge. It's expensive. Spend the money in it. It's got some incredible amount of information about first century, all the history, even historical, archaeological. And I'm reading this book because I'm going to do a teaching on the book of Romans, and I'm gathering a lot of information from that time frame and what was happening in those places. Amen. This is a short teaching that I'm doing today, basically about an hour and 5 minutes. It's not really the normal Torah portion. We're going to continue next week with the Torah, with the Parashat Kedoshim, and we're going to continue sharing the wonderful works of our Torah. May Yahweh bless you, keep you, protect you. I pray that you have great unleavened bread week here, and remember that the last day of unleavened bread is also a special Sabbath. Let's honor the Creator for who He is, and give Him praises for His willingness to be wanting to come in covenant with us. What an honor! And I pray that this Passover that you had was a great experience understanding what covenant and the threshold covenant. Yahweh bless you and keep you. We'll see you next time. Shalom, shalom.